When a forgotten records room is uncovered during the renovation of an abandoned hospital, workers find a hidden ledger documenting 14 unexpected patient deaths, all tied to the same night shift nurse, Mary Ann Holt. But the entries are inconsistent, the handwriting varies, and some dates don't match official files. Unsure whether Holt was a killer, a scapegoat, or part of a deeper cover-up, Bennett Crowe is called in to untangle the truth. As he interviews former staff, uncovers altered logs, and tracks a second suspect who vanished decades ago, Bennett slowly realizes someone rewrote the past to protect the guilty, and someone else tried to erase it entirely. The real killer is still alive, still quiet, and much harder to find.
The Night Shift Nurse. A story by 10 Chapters Studio. Chapter 1. The Room Behind the Wall. The demolition crew found it by accident. A jackhammer slipped, the drywall buckled, and behind it, where blueprints insisted there was only structural support, they saw a narrow metal door, sealed shut and painted over decades ago. By the time Bennett Crowe arrived, the workers had stopped pretending they were on break. They hovered near the entrance, like men standing at the edge of a grave. "Mr. Crowe, over here," the foreman said, lowering his voice as if the dust itself might overhear them. He led Bennett up a concrete stairwell and into the gutted third floor of what used to be West Hill Memorial Hospital. Rusty bed frames bent in the corners, pipes hung open like exposed ribs, and the sour smell of mold clung to everything. Bennett's limp echoed softly across the empty floor. He didn't apologize for slowing the pace. He never did. The foreman stopped beside the newly exposed doorway. "We cracked it open an hour ago. Figured it was just some old storage room. Then we saw what was inside." Bennett pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "And you called me?" "Let's just say we weren't keen on explaining this to the investors, and somebody in city planning said you deal with unusual historical findings." A dry smile barely touched Bennett's mouth. "That's one way to put it." He stepped inside. The room was cold, darker than the rest of the gutted hallway, and surprisingly intact. Sturdy metal shelves lined the walls, filled with thick ledgers, file boxes and binders coated in decades of dust. A single desk sat against the far wall, a rusted lamp still clamped to the edge. Not a scrap of graffiti or sign of intrusion. No one had been in here since the hospital closed 28 years ago. Bennett pulled on gloves and lifted the closest ledger from a shelf. "Mortality logbook, Inpatient Wing C," the label read. The handwriting on the spine was neat, deliberate. Someone had taken their time organizing these. He opened it. Rows of patient names, admission dates, procedures. Then, Bennett's brow tightened. Clustered entries marked only as unexpected decline. 14 in all. Every death occurred between 2 and 4 a.m., and every single one noted the same nurse on duty, M. Holt. The foreman watched him. "We haven't touched anything else. What does it look like?" "It looks," Bennett said quietly, "like somebody didn't want these logs included in the hospital's official archives." He turned a few more pages. Some entries were smooth and confident, others were heavier, shakier, as if another hand had tried to mimic the same style. One date contained 2 different inks. A patient's name appeared to have been written in later, squeezed into a gap that didn't match the spacing of the rest. This wasn't just a forgotten room. It was a burial. Bennett closed the ledger. Who sealed this off? No idea. The door was welded shut from the outside. We only found it because we hit the wrong beam. Wrong or right, Bennett thought, depending on who you asked. He moved to the desk. Old carbon copy forms lay scattered inside the drawers.
medication logs, night shift notes, and 3 unsigned incident reports, all describing minor concerns about a nurse Holt, none of which were ever forwarded to administration. One report mentioned Holt entering a recovering patient's room without clear necessity. Another described her as over-involved. Nothing definitive, nothing that proved wrongdoing, but enough in hindsight to feel like a warning no one wanted to pursue. The hospital was shutting down during those final years. Staff shortages, financial crises, merger rumors. A mess. Exactly the kind of environment where problems quietly disappeared. The foreman shifted his weight. So what do we do? Call the police? The city? The news? Not yet, Bennett said. You do nothing, touch nothing, and don't mention this room to anyone outside your crew. That's serious? Given the condition of this room, someone went to a lot of trouble to hide it. I'd like to know why before the wrong people take an interest. Bennett scanned the shelves one more time. 14 unexplained deaths, all tied to one quiet night nurse. A hidden room, altered entries, conflicting handwriting. Nothing here was accidental. He stepped back into the hallway, letting the cold air settle around him. This will take a while, he said. The foreman frowned. To figure out if it's murder? Then it slipped his hands into his coat pockets. No, he said. To figure out who tried so hard to make sure no one ever asked.
End of chapter.
Chapter 2. Old Files, Old Lies. City records smelled like toner and old carpet, and the faint disappointment of people who hadn't expected to spend their careers in windowless rooms. Bennett sat at a terminal that had seen better decades, the monitor humming softly as he scrolled through a digitized list of West Hill Memorial Hospital employees. The hospital's logo, faded and outdated, sat in the corner of each document like a ghost that refused to move on. He typed the name from the ledger. Holt Marianne E. Registered nurse. Night shift. Inpatient wing C. Years of service, 14. A long time to work in the same place, in the same hours, watching the worst of human frailty between midnight and dawn. He clicked the personnel file. The screen populated with scanned forms. Her initial hiring paperwork, annual performance reviews, pay grade changes. Marianne Holt started as a fresh graduate with excellent bedside manner and strong clinical skills. Early reviews called her reliable, calm under pressure, supportive to peers. Later reviews were shorter, fewer adjectives, a lot of meets expectations. One note, buried in a mid-career evaluation, stood out. Tendency to over-identify with end-of-life patients. Recommend closer supervision on emotionally demanding cases. Bennett leaned back, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the desk. Over-identify was administrative code for too attached or too involved. He clicked another tab. Disciplinary/incident reports. Nothing. No formal write-ups, no reprimands, no suspensions. Which didn't match the unsigned papers he'd found in the ledger room. Someone had chosen what made it into the official record and what didn't. Find something? A voice asked behind him. He turned. The clerk who'd set him up at the terminal hovered in the aisle, clutching a mug that said, "I pause for coffee and justice."
Employee file, Bennett said. Is this everything you have on Holt? Everything in our system, she replied. Personnel files were digitized when West Hill closed. Why, missing something? It depends who you ask. He rotated the screen slightly. Can you pull up administrative board minutes from the last 2 years before the hospital shut down? She blinked. That might take a while. I'm very patient, Bennett said. My coffee isn't. She snorted despite herself and walked away, muttering something about cold case people and their timing. He returned to the file. Holt had resigned 6 months before West Hill closed. A simple letter. I hereby submit my resignation, effective in 2 weeks. Thank you for the opportunity to serve at West Hill Memorial Hospital. No explanation, no note of health issues or family obligations. Her forwarding address was a modest apartment in a neighboring suburb. He wrote it down. It was almost certainly obsolete after nearly 3 decades, but old addresses often left useful trails. The clerk returned with a cardboard box and a tablet. "You got lucky," she said, setting them down. "Board minutes from the last 3 years. Digitization stalled out on this batch, so you're getting the paper version. Try not to sneeze them into pieces." "Do my best," Bennett said. "Appreciate it." "Anything to break up the zoning applications," she sighed, wandering off. He opened the box. Typed agendas, neat signatures, routine budget votes, staffing discussions, merger rumors. Then a line in the minutes from January 3 years before closure. Item 5, Mortality Review Concerns, Inpatient Wing C. Discussion held regarding elevated nighttime mortality rates. Action, internal review to be conducted by Chief of Medicine and Nursing Director. Public communication discouraged pending conclusions. No follow-up appeared in the next month's minutes, or the one after that. Concern raised, box ticked, nothing resolved. He scanned further. An entry from May. Item 3, Risk Management/Legal Exposure. Counsel advised minimizing creation of speculative documentation regarding outcomes under investigation. Recommendation: focus on general systemic issues rather than specific staff names in written reports. Bennett's mouth thinned. There it was in black and white. Advice to keep things vague. Safer that way if anyone ever came asking. He closed the folder and checked his watch. Late morning. Just enough time to annoy someone who had spent an entire career avoiding questions. He scribbled down a name from the minutes. Margaret Delaney, Director of Nursing. Retired now, living in a tidy bungalow on the edge of town. He'd already pulled her address before leaving home. She'd served as the last hospital's nursing director before early retirement for health reasons. Health had a lot of definitions. Margaret Delaney opened the door a cautious 2 inches, chain still engaged. She was in her 70s now, hair white and neatly brushed, a cardigan buttoned over a crisp blouse. Her eyes were sharp behind rectangular glasses. "I'm not buying anything," she said. "Good news, I'm not selling anything. Bennett Crowe." He held up a card. "I'm looking into some old West Hill Memorial records. Your name came up." "That place is gone. Good riddance. We did what we could with what we had." "I don't doubt it. I'm not here about everything. Just one thing." Her gaze dropped to the card, then back to his face. After a moment, she closed the door, unhooked the chain, and reopened it fully. "You walk with a limp, still doing field work. That's either dedication or stubbornness." "Bit of both," Bennett said. She stepped aside. 5 minutes, then I'm making lunch." The living room was tidy, full of framed photos of grandchildren and a sun-faded West Hill group picture on the far wall. Nurses in white, doctors in dull suits. No names printed, but Bennett could guess who she'd been. He didn't sit. "Do you remember a nurse named Marianne Holt?" The change was small, but he caught it. Her shoulders drew in by a fraction, fingers tightening at the back of the armchair. "Of course," she said. "I had a lot of nurses." "She worked nights in Wing C. Her name is on a cluster of mortality logs we just found in a sealed records room. 14 deaths flagged as unexpected, all on her shifts." Delaney's lips pressed into a pale line. "They're still digging that place up, aren't they?" "They are. Those logs were not meant to be accessible. she said slowly. Clearly, Bennett said. You chaired the meeting where they discussed elevated nighttime mortality. She didn't ask how he knew. She just sighed and sank into her armchair like someone who'd carried a box for years and finally set it down. We had questions, she said, patterns that didn't fit. We ordered an internal review. And then, she said, looking straight at him, we were told to stop asking them. By who? She hesitated for the first time. It depends, she said quietly, on whether you're here to blame one nurse or to look at everyone who chose not to see. Bennett watched her, the silence stretching out. Let's start, he said, with what you saw. End of chapter. Chapter 3. The Nurse Who Slipped Away. Margaret Delaney didn't move for several seconds. Her fingers traced the arm of her chair, restless, as if something long dormant had started to stir. Finally, she exhaled and spoke, not with guilt, but with the weary precision of someone who had gone over these memories many times in private. Marianne Holt wasn't a problem, not at first. She was steady, soft-spoken, the kind of nurse families trusted. Patients liked her. She stayed late, picked up shifts, never complained. Then, Bennett asked. Then people started dying. Delaney's eyes moved to a photo on the wall, her younger self in scrubs, standing with a row of nurses. It wasn't obvious at first. Our records weren't automated. Night shifts were understaffed. Random losses didn't alarm anyone. But after the third or fourth unexpected decline, one of the night supervisors flagged it. Did they name Holt? Not directly, she said. They said the deaths occurred during her shifts, but we had other issues: aging equipment, medication shortages, inexperienced residents, plenty of plausible explanations. But not enough, Bennett said. No, Delaney leaned back. We started watching, quietly. Review committees, chart audits, cross-checking doses. And Marianne, she stayed calm through all of it. Too calm, perhaps. Did anyone confront her? We planned to, Delaney said, but before we could, the hospital board intervened. Shut it down? Yes, her voice sharpened. They told us to suspend the review and keep it internal. Do not create liability, they said. No unfounded accusations. There was talk of a merger. Bad press would have killed us. It was the kind of bureaucratic cowardice Bennett had seen dozens of times. Protect the institution, not the truth. And Holt, he asked. She resigned. 2 weeks' notice, no drama, no excuses. Just gone. Delaney looked at him over her glasses. If you're wondering whether I think she did it, yes. But proving it then, impossible. Did you ever look for her afterward? No, she said. We were told to let it go. Bennett nodded. Delaney's words matched the patterns in the records, but left a gap. People rarely just resign in the middle of a quiet internal investigation unless they know something is coming. Did anyone else have access to those patients? Bennett asked. Delaney hesitated. There was another name, an orderly, Elias Kern. Young, unpredictable. He quit suddenly, just days after Holt. So the second suspect had threads buried in the hospital's history too. Bennett filed the name in his mind. Why mention him now? He asked. Because if you're going to open this mess, you might as well know it wasn't only Holt people whispered about. Bennett watched the way her jaw set, not defensive, resigned. I appreciate your time, he said. Delaney stood slowly. Mr. Crowe. He paused. Be careful. Everyone wants this forgotten. And Marianne, she was the kind of person you didn't see unless she wanted you to. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright for the weight of the conversation. Bennett drove to the next stop on his list, the address Holt had listed after she resigned. A small 2-story walk-up in a neighborhood that since turned into an overpriced development project. The building still stood,
but the units had been gutted and renovated. No tenants from 28 years ago remained. He spoke briefly with the building manager, who flipped through old transition documents. "Holt?" the manager repeated. "Nothing current, but there's a cardboard box in storage labeled with some names of tenants from the 90s. If her name's on it, you can take it." They found it wedged behind paint cans and outdated smoke alarms. Inside, water-damaged envelopes, obsolete phone bills, disconnected utilities notices, and a change of address request that was never processed. Bennett sifted carefully until he found something useful. A pay stub, not from West Hill, but from a private elder care home in the same year she resigned. She hadn't left nursing. She had simply moved quietly somewhere else. He checked the facility name. Greenvale Rest Home. Closed 2001. Another closed institution. Another place with records tucked into storage somewhere. Patterns within patterns. Bennett's foot began to ache from standing too long, and he shifted his weight. He called the city clerk's office. "I need archival records for Greenvale Rest Home. Staff lists, patient logs, any mortality reports from 1994 to 2001. The clerk on the line hesitated. "That's a lot of boxes." "I'm used to boxes," Bennett said. "And there's no guarantee anything survived the shutdown." "There rarely is," he replied. "Check anyway." He hung up and returned to his car, reviewing the thin trail Holt had left behind. One resignation, one unprocessed change of address, one job at another understaffed, unregulated facility. Not vanishing, not hiding, just slipping into places where oversight was weak and questions were fewer. Someone like Marianne Holt didn't flee, she flowed. As Bennett started the car, his phone buzzed. A text from the clerk he had just spoken with. "Found something. You'll want to see this." A second photo followed, a worn folder labeled Greenvale Staff, Incidents. Bennett stared at it, feeling the first quiet click of the case beginning to open. The past hadn't disappeared. It had simply been moved to another shelf. End of chapter.
Chapter 4. The Greenvale Connection. The municipal archives basement was colder than the January air outside, the kind of cold that settled into concrete and stayed there. The clerk, Evan, mid-20s, earnest, chronically overworked, met Bennett at the elevator with the folder tucked under his arm like contraband. "This was in the wrong box," Evan said. "Technically, you're supposed to submit a request form and wait 2 to 5 business days, but you looked like someone who doesn't enjoy waiting." Bennett lifted an eyebrow. "What gave it away?" "Your whole vibe," Evan said, waving vaguely at Bennett's coat, expression, and posture as if all three were equally intimidating. Bennett took the folder. "I have my appreciation." "Oh, wow, high praise." Evan gestured to a metal table. "Feel free to work here, but don't take anything home unless I scan it first. City rules." Bennett nodded, set down the folder, and began. Greenvale Staff, Incidents. The cover alone was promising. Water stains, a torn corner, the frayed edge of a label peeled off decades ago. Paper that had been handled frequently tended to hold better secrets. Inside were half a dozen forms, typed and carbon-copied, each describing episodes at the elder care home. Medication miscounts, a fall with unclear circumstances, a patient found wandering unsupervised at night, and 3 complaints referencing the same staff member, Holt, Marianne. But unlike West Hill, these complaints were signed, and they were blunt. Incident report, night shift. Nurse Holt administered analgesics outside scheduled intervals. Patient presented with decreased responsiveness. Supervisor cautioned Holt. She refused to acknowledge error. Incident report, patient decline. Nurse Holt noted patient comfortable despite clear respiratory distress. Delay in escalation to physician on call. Patient expired before arrival. Recommend additional oversight. Incident report, staff concern. Multiple aides report discomfort with Nurse Holt's handling of palliative patients. Tendency to enter rooms unprompted, adjust medications without consultation. Staff request reassignment from her supervision.
There was no record of disciplinary action, no suspension, no follow-up, just handwritten notes in the margins, different pens, different handwriting, each saying some variation of address after audit, pending review, to be discussed. Nothing was ever discussed, because the facility closed abruptly in 2001 after financial mismanagement and an outbreak investigation that went nowhere. Patterns repeated, weak oversight, quiet exits, and Holt, once again, left no forwarding address. Footsteps sounded on the concrete. Evan approached, balancing 2 more folders. "These were next to the Greenvale box," he said. "Don't know if they're related, but they share date ranges and staff initials." Bennett thanked him and opened the first. It contained laminated staff ID lists from Greenvale's final year. A few names had been crossed out in red pencil, terminated, transferred, or deceased. One name immediately caught his eye. Kern Elias, orderly. The same orderly Delaney had mentioned, still an employee at Greenvale, at least for a while. Elias Kern hadn't disappeared after West Hill. He had followed Holt to the next facility, or she had followed him. Either way, Bennett felt the subtle shift in the case. Kern was not a footnote. He was a thread. He scanned the backside of the ID list. Next to Kern's name was a handwritten note. Left abruptly after investigation notice. No exit interview. The date, April 1996. 2 years after Holt arrived at Greenvale. 2 years before the cluster of complaints peaked. People usually didn't run without reason.
Bennett closed the folders, his mind quietly arranging the pieces. Holt's suspicious night shift pattern at West Hill, an abrupt resignation during an internal review, a second facility with similar incidents, Kern appearing in both places, then vanishing, a ledger hidden behind a welded door, a hospital board invested in burying their problems. Nothing straightforward, nothing conclusive yet, but the human pattern was unmistakable. Wherever Holt worked, patients under her care died disproportionately. And wherever Holt went, Kern was never far behind, until the moment he abruptly left. Bennett stood, bracing briefly against the table until the ache in his legs settled. "Evan," he called. The clerk peeked around the corner. "Yeah?" "I need current contact information for any former staff listed here, especially Elias Kern. Cross-reference with employment records, tax filings, forwarding addresses, anything public." "That's a lot. Might take time." "I have time. And coffee." "Great," Evan muttered, "because I don't."
An hour later, Evan returned, holding a sticky note between 2 fingers like it might bite. "Okay," he said. "This is weird." "They usually are," Bennett replied. "Kern hasn't held a steady job in 20 years. No utilities in his name, no property, no driver's license renewal. But, Bennett pressed, a P.O. box in his name has been active for 19 years at a mail depot near the state line." Bennett pocketed the note. If someone vanishes but keeps a mail drop, they're not gone. They just don't want to be found. He zipped his coat, gathered the folders for scanning, and headed toward the exit. Mary Ann Holt left fingerprints of her past everywhere she went. But Kern? Kern was still alive, and Bennett had just found the first place he might surface. End of chapter. Chapter 5. The Man Who Never Left a Trail. The mail depot sat 20 minutes outside the city, tucked between a discount tire shop and a shuttered diner, the kind of place people drove past without ever noticing. Bennett pulled into the gravel lot and killed the engine. The air smelled of cold metal and old exhaust. The building itself looked like it hadn't been repainted since the 90s. Inside, rows of P.O. boxes lined the walls in neat metallic grids. A lone clerk, the kind of man who had mastered the art of appearing busy while doing nothing, looked up from a magazine. "Can I help you?" he asked, tone suggesting he sincerely hoped the answer was no. "I'm looking into P.O. Box 412, Bennett replied, laying a card on the counter. "Registered to Elias Kern." The clerk frowned. "We don't give out information about customers." "I'm not asking for personal details," Bennett replied, laying a card on the counter. "Just whether the box is still active." The man glanced down at the card, then back at Bennett's face. Something in Bennett's expression, calm, patient, unblinking, persuaded him. "It's active. Payments up to date. Box gets checked irregularly. Sometimes weekly, sometimes not for months." "Recently?" The clerk scratched his jaw. "Yeah, someone came by last week. Didn't see the face. Hoodie up, kept his head down. Tallish. Could have been anyone." "And the mail?" "Nothing's piling up," the clerk shrugged. "Whoever he is, he's still coming back." Bennett thanked him and stepped back into the cold. Kern was alive, or someone who wanted to appear as Kern. The question wasn't where he lived, it was why he was still tethered to this box. Mail drops meant movement, caution, or fear. Bennett scanned the parking lot, noting an old outdoor camera mounted above the entrance. He went back in. "That working?" he asked, nodding at the monitor. "Mostly," the clerk said. "Storage runs 20 days. Could you pull footage from the last 2 weeks?" The man hesitated. "You got a warrant?" "No," Bennett said. "But I have a cold case with 14 dead patients and an ex-orderly who vanished around the same time they did." The clerk stared. Then slowly he turned the monitor toward him. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered, tapping a few keys. A grid of timestamps appeared. Bennett leaned in. There, 3 days ago, a tall figure in a heavy jacket, hood up, approaching the boxes, his back to the camera, head lowered. He moved quickly, retrieving 2 envelopes before slipping out of frame. No identifying facial features, no gait irregularity, no visible tattoo or mark, just anonymity perfected. Bennett used frame-by-frame advance, studying posture, hand shape, movements. One detail caught his eye. The man favored his right hip subtly. Not a limp, but a guardedness, a tension. People who spent years on their feet in medical environments often carried injuries they'd learned to hide. Bennett captured a screenshot on his phone. Not to identify the man visually, that wasn't possible, but to study body language, proportions, movement style. Clues lived in silhouettes. He thanked the clerk again and left, pulling his coat tighter as he crossed the lot. Back in his car, Bennett texted Evan. "Run Kern's name through employment filings, medical licenses, tax records, interstate moves. Expand to aliases if needed." Evan responded almost instantly, a digital sigh contained in 3 dots. "We'll try. Nothing promises to exist, though. Guy lived like a ghost." Bennett replied, "Ghosts still leave shadows." He started the engine, but his mind wasn't on Kern alone. Patterns were emerging, and they all pointed back, not just to Holt, but to something between them. At West Hill, Holt was the nurse on duty during every suspicious death. At Greenvale, Kern worked night shifts on her wing. Complaints spiked after he left. Was Kern protecting Holt? Was he afraid of her? Was he copying her? Or had they simply shared the same hours until one of them understood the other too well? Whatever Kern knew, he'd run from it. And whatever Holt was, she had kept moving into places where she could slip through administrative cracks. 2 people circling the same quiet crimes, one dominating the pattern, the other fleeing its edges. The camera image replayed in his mind, the guarded hip,
the way he scanned the room before approaching the boxes. Someone who expected danger. Someone who didn't want to be found. Someone who knew that a sealed room at West Hill just reopened a chapter he'd spent decades avoiding. Bennett turned onto the highway. He didn't need Kern's address yet, only his fear. Fear made people predictable. And if Kern was afraid of Holt, then Holt was the next stop on the map. Bennett pressed his foot lightly on the gas. Time to find the nurse who vanished without ever going far enough.
End of chapter.
Chapter 6. The House at the Edge of Town. The address Bennett pulled from the remnants of Holt's paperwork wasn't promising. A 28-year-old forwarding form, never processed, led to a neighborhood that had aged badly. Slumped porches, peeling siding, yards where toys had rusted into the soil. People didn't disappear in places like this, they eroded. He parked at the curb and studied the street. Quiet. A stray dog wandered between trash cans. 2 houses over, someone's curtains twitched at his arrival. Holt's listed address was a faded duplex with warped steps and a mailbox hanging at a tilt. Most people would have assumed it was abandoned, but Bennett noticed the details that mattered. The faint white marks on the doorframe, the threadbare but current welcome mat, a freshly replaced porch light. Someone lived here. Someone who didn't want it to look like they did. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Softer. Still nothing. He glanced around the porch. People who live invisibly often relied on subtle security, peepholes disguised as paint bubbles, draft blockers hiding secret gaps to view visitors, curtains left just a hair uneven. At the bottom corner of the left window, he saw it, a pinprick shadow shifting behind the curtain. Someone was there. "My name is Bennett Crowe," he said, pitching his voice even. "I'm here about your time at West Hill Memorial." The shadow froze. That was an answer. After several seconds, the lock clicked, once, then twice, and the door opened only the width of a chain. A woman's face appeared in the gap, thin and pale, with hair pulled back in a way that suggested more practicality than vanity. Lines fanned from the corners of her eyes, not from smiling, but from watching. She wasn't old, at least not in the way the file had predicted. Mid-60s, perhaps, but there was a fragility to her, a brittleness born from years of shrinking into small rooms. "I haven't worked in a hospital in decades," she said. Her voice was soft, almost careful. "If you're here for verification, I don't give references anymore." "I'm not here for a reference, Miss Holt." A flicker, barely noticeable. She didn't deny the name. "I'm looking into some old mortality records from Wing C." Her fingers tightened around the chain latch. "I don't know anything about that." "I didn't say what was in the records." A longer pause. The curtain-lipped door gapped widened just enough to see the tension in her jaw. "Who sent you?" asked she. "No one," Bennett said. "I found a sealed room at West Hill. Ledgers, incident reports. They point toward you." Her eyes lifted slightly, just a fraction, but he saw the calculation behind them. He'd dealt with doctors, nurses, first responders, people who'd lived too long on the edge of life and death, accustomed to choosing their reactions. Holt was one of them. Nothing shocked her. Everything was evaluated. "That hospital closed," she said. "And you left," Bennett replied. She exhaled through her nose, a soft, controlled release. Everybody left. Not everyone had 14 unexplained patient deaths on their shift logs. Her gaze sharpened with something he couldn't yet read. Fear, anger, resignation. It wasn't guilt. Not yet. "Those were difficult years," she said. "Too many patients, too few staff. Mistakes happened." That's what I'm trying to determine, what kind of mistakes. She closed the door a moment. He heard the chain rattle. Then the door opened further, but only a few inches. Enough to speak, not enough to enter. "Are you here to arrest me?" she asked quietly. "If I were, more people would be with me." Her eyes flicked past him to the empty street, confirming the truth. "Then what do you want?" she whispered. "I want to understand," he said. "Your name was on every shift, every unexpected death, every pattern, but the documents were edited. Some entries weren't in your handwriting, and someone hid those files intentionally." She blinked slowly. "You think I altered my own logs?" Her voice carried no panic, only surprise. "I think someone did. The question is who and why." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "You should leave," she said. "Miss Holt." "I said leave." Her voice trembled for the first time, not from fear, something closer to despair. "I can't help you. It was too long ago." She began to shut the door. "Elias Kern is still alive," Bennett said. The door stopped abruptly. Everything froze. Her breathing hitched, faint but audible. Her eyes widened, not dramatically, but enough to collapse the mask she'd held so carefully. "He's alive?" she whispered. "Yes." She stared at him, throat tightening, and for the first time since he arrived, her expression held something unmistakable. Not guilt, not relief, not fear. Recognition. Whatever happened at West Hill, whatever haunted those ledgers, Elias Kern was part of it. Holt swallowed hard. "Please leave," she said again, voice softer now, almost broken. "This isn't over, and if he's alive, I am not safe." She closed the door, gently but firmly. Bennett didn't try to knock again. He stepped off the porch, mind turning. Holt wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the only one running. Someone else had a stake in keeping the past buried, and Bennett had just told them, without meaning to, that their ghost was still walking.
End of chapter.
Chapter 7. What the Orderly Saw.
Bennett didn't drive far after leaving Holt's house. 2 blocks over, he pulled into an empty church parking lot shaded by a winter bare oak and sat with the engine ticking as it cooled. He replayed the moment Holt's expression cracked. He's alive? And the way her voice had changed. Fear. Not of being caught, of someone else. Whatever Holt had done, she wasn't afraid of confessing it. She was afraid of Kern. That flipped the case on its spine. He opened his laptop and connected to his hotspot. Evan had already sent the data dump he'd requested. Not polished, not filtered, but raw. Tax gaps, expired licenses, half-complete employment stubs, fragmented change of address forms. Kern's life had no continuity. It was all interruptions. Then Bennett found the first real thread. A work record from a construction company in '97, a payroll entry, a job site in a different state. It ended abruptly, followed by an emergency entry for a minor workplace injury. No details. He drilled deeper. The injury report listed a location. And an emergency contact. M. Holt. Bennett leaned back, eyebrows lifting slightly. It wasn't Holt following Kern. It wasn't Kern following Holt. At some point, after West Hill, before Greenvale, they were tangled enough that one listed the other as emergency contact. That kind of connection didn't emerge from a workplace hallway relationship. A pact? A dependency? A shared secret? Whatever happened, neither had spoken about the other since. He made a decision. Kern had run for decades. Running men only stopped when someone forced them to. He started the engine and headed for the only person who could explain Holt's fear, the orderly who vanished when the mortality pattern peaked.
The construction site from Kern's injury file was in a decayed industrial fringe outside the city. Bennett found the supervisor's name in an old directory and drove to a mechanic shop with a gravel lot and a chain-link fence sagging under the weight of old vines. Inside, a broad-shouldered man in oil-stained coveralls looked up from a lifted truck. "You Crowe?" he asked. "You called." "Thank you for seeing me," Bennett said. The man wiped his hands on a rag. "Don't have long. What's this about?" "An employee of yours from 97, Elias Kern." "That guy?" The supervisor snorted. "Yeah, I remember. Odd one. Kept to himself. Didn't talk unless he had to." "Reliable?" Bennett asked. "Hard worker," the man said, "but jumpy. Skittish, like somebody was always about to tap him on the shoulder." "Any trouble on the job?" The supervisor hesitated. "There was an incident. We never filed it. Might be what you're looking for." Bennett waited. "One day he got spooked. Wouldn't say why. Dropped his tools, climbed down the scaffolding like his life depended on it. I followed him. He was shaking. He said he saw someone at the edge of the lot. A woman." "A woman?" Bennett repeated. "Short hair, dark coat, watching him. When I looked, nobody was there. Thought he was dehydrated or something, but the look on his face..." The supervisor shook his head. "I've seen grown men freeze before, but not like that." Bennett's pulse tightened slightly. "Did he describe her?" "He said she looked familiar. Then he realized who it was and went pale." Bennett didn't breathe. "Did he say the name?" "No, he wouldn't." The supervisor tossed the rag onto a toolbox. "Next day, he quit. Just walked. Left his gear. Didn't collect his pay. He said he wasn't safe here. Whatever he thought he saw scared the hell out of him." "And you never saw him again?" "Not once." Bennett stepped back, absorbing the shape of the narrative forming in front of him. Kern wasn't hiding from Holt because she was hunting him. He was hiding because he thought he could find him anywhere, because she had already had, because she had shown up on a construction site 2 states away. Holt had said she wasn't safe, that this wasn't over, but the truth was shifting. It wasn't fear of a man who ran, it was fear of the woman who didn't need to. As Bennett walked back toward his car, a low ringing sounded from his pocket. He pulled out his phone, a text from Evan. "Found the last known mailing address connected to Kern's P.O. box. It's not residential, it's a storage unit." Then a second text. "Paid in cash for 19 years, active access this week." Bennett stood still, the cold wind threading through his coat. Kern was still circling the edges of his old life, still returning to the same locked box, the same storage space, still watching for someone who had found him once before. And if Holt had truly appeared on that job site, she wasn't the one running, she was the one tracking. But why? Bennett unlocked his car, slid behind the wheel, and started the engine. If Kern was the frightened one, then Holt, soft-voiced, brittle, trembling at her doorway, was not the woman Kern had seen. Someone else had been watching him, and Bennett had just stepped into the middle of 2 people who had spent decades trying to stay out of each other's shadow.
End of chapter.
Chapter 8. The Storage Unit. The storage facility was one of those sprawling, low-lying compounds on the outskirts of town. Endless rows of metal doors, each painted a cheerful blue that didn't quite hide the underlying rust. A keypad guarded the entrance. Bennett pressed the call button and waited. A voice crackled through the speaker. "Office is closed. I'm here regarding Unit 317. I need access information." A pause. Then, "We don't give out client details." "I'm not asking for them." Bennett kept his tone even. "Just confirmation that the unit is active." "That's private. 14 deaths and a missing orderly aren't." Another pause. Then the gate buzzed open. Inside the office, the manager, a woman in her 50s with a sharp bob and a sharper stare, leaned back in her chair. "You law enforcement?" "No." "Then let's pretend this is a fire inspection." "That works." She typed into her system with practiced reluctance. Unit 317, paid up through the end of the month, accessed 3 days ago. The same day the P.O. box was checked. Her fingers hovered, then lowered. "You want a log?" "I do." She printed a sheet and slid it across the counter. Bennett studied the timestamps. Kern, or someone using his credentials, had entered the gate at 6:47 p.m. The unit had been opened for 13 minutes, and then the exit gate logged a departure at 6:57.
"Do you have footage?" Bennett asked. "We keep 45 days. And from 3 days ago? I can queue it up." She pulled up a video window. The image flickered, static-laced. A row of units appeared, grainy in the twilight. "There," she said, pointing. A figure walked into frame. Same height, same guarded right hip posture as the man from the mail depot. Hood up, shoulders hunched. He unlocked Unit 317 quickly, stepping inside with a flashlight. The door stayed open just long enough for Bennett to see the shape of a tall metal filing cabinet inside, industrial grade, dented, heavy. Then the figure closed the door behind him. Bennett watched the footage for the full 13 minutes. Nothing else moved. But the moment the door reopened, he caught something. The man looked over his shoulder twice, sharply, as if listening for footsteps. Then he disappeared into the darkness beyond the camera's view. Fear again. Chronic, bone-deep fear. The manager leaned in. "You want to look inside?" "Yes," Bennett said. Unit 317 was midway down a corridor where the lights buzzed faintly and flickered every so seconds. The air smelled of dust, cold concrete, and something metallic. The manager unlocked the unit. "I'll be outside," she said firmly, "not going in there with you." Bennett stepped inside alone. The space was small, 8 by 10 maybe, and filled not with junk or furniture, but records. Boxes stacked neatly, labeled in block letters. Some dated back 20 years, others looked newer. And against the far wall stood the filing cabinet from the video. He pulled open the top drawer. Inside were binders, thick, organized, chronological. West Hill, night shift logs, Greenvale, incidents, patient decline, personal notes, do not destroy. Bennett removed the first binder and opened it. Not official records, copies, pages meticulously typed or handwritten summaries, observations, notes. Kern had compiled everything: staff schedules, patient names, patterns, incidents, as if he'd spent years reconstructing the truth no one else wanted to face. And then he found the section labeled MH. Bennett froze. There, on a sheet of lined paper in Kern's neat print. I know she didn't mean to, at first, but then she changed, became someone else, someone quiet and cold. I tried to stop her. I tried to warn them. No one listened. She said I misunderstood, that they were suffering, but they weren't. I saw her once, standing at the foot of the bed after it was done, smiling, just a little. That's when I knew I had to get away. Bennett read the words twice. Kern hadn't fled because he was guilty. He had fled because he had witnessed something he couldn't explain or endure. He turned the page. Another note, written years later. If anyone finds this, don't talk to her alone. I think she believes she's helping. I think she always believed that. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Bennett turned toward the open unit door. The manager stood at the threshold, face pale. She said, "Someone just came through the gate, checked in with the same code as earlier this week."
Bennett's pulse sharpened. "Which direction?" he asked. She pointed shakily down the row, and Bennett stepped out of the unit, closing the metal door behind him, just as a shadow rounded the corner.
End of chapter.
Chapter 9. The Shadow in the Aisle.
The footsteps were soft, deliberate, too light for the echoing concrete, yet distinct enough to break the silence. Bennett stepped out of the storage unit just as the shadow rounded the corner. The corridor lights flickered, casting an uneasy rhythm of light and dark along the walls, as if the building itself was trying to warn him. He didn't speak, he didn't move fast. He just watched. The figure paused a few yards away, hood up, back towards him. The stance was familiar, guarded right hip, shoulders slightly forward, like someone anticipating movement, someone who knew danger when it sensed it. Not running, waiting. Bennett didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked, slow, unhurried, measured, towards the stranger. "Elias?" Bennett said, calm but clear. The figure stiffened, then pivoted, just enough for Bennett to see a glimpse of a face under the shadow of the hood. Not Kern. A woman, mid-40s, stern features, eyes like winter steel. Bennett's mind cataloged details without panic. No limp, no nervous tick, posture alert, not frightened. Her eyes met his. "Don't come closer," she said, voice low but firm. "Easy," Bennett said. "I don't want to startle you. I'm here about the records in Unit 317. "You shouldn't be here," she said, eyes scanning the row. "Someone's bound to come." "I already saw someone," Bennett replied. "You." She didn't flinch. "You're not Kern," he stated, not asked. "I'm not," she said, "but I know him." Bennett tilted his head slightly. "Go on." The woman exhaled, her jaw tightening before she spoke. "My name is Sarah Kern. I was Elias's sister." Bennett studied her. Not a guess, just verification. "What brings you here?" "You shouldn't have opened that unit," she said, jerking her chin towards the closed door. "He left those records for a reason." "He wanted the truth preserved," Bennett said evenly, "not buried." "No," she said, shaking her head. "Those aren't records, they're warnings." "Warnings of what?" asked Bennett. Sarah dropped her gaze, looking towards the storage doors behind her, then back to the ground. "Holt," she said. "My brother didn't run because he was afraid of getting in trouble. He ran because he saw what she did, and he knew she would come for him." Bennett's brow tightened. "But Holt lives here now, in town. She's not in hiding." "She came back," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks ago, after he left."
"He left?" Bennett asked. Did he ever tell you where he was going?"
Sarah paused. "No. And he took precautions. He never stayed in one place long. That P.O. box was his tether, just enough to keep mail without tying him to a town." "You said a Holt came back," Bennett repeated. "She did," Sarah confirmed. "Not to find him, to draw him out. Because she thinks he saw too much, and he did. He saw how she arranged incidents at West Hill, how she handled patients unnaturally. He tried to report some of it at Greenvale, but the administration covered it up, just like West Hill did." "And then Kern kept his own notes," Bennett said. "Exactly," Sarah said. "He wasn't trying to convict Holt. He was trying to remember what he saw. But he also knew she was watching him. Some nights he swore he saw her outside his window, just standing there, like she'd been waiting." "Did he sketch her, describe her?" Sarah shook her head. "Never. He said it wasn't her face that haunted him. It was her eyes. Empty. Like she wasn't looking at you. She was looking through you." Bennett absorbed this quietly. Nothing about it was sensational. It's the way trauma imprints itself. less like a scream, more like a lingering chill at the back of memory. Then Sarah's expression hardened. "You should have left those documents sealed," she said, "because she doesn't want them out."
"Why now?" Bennett asked. "Why return after all these years?" "Because something brought her back," Sarah said. "Something she thought she lost, and she won't stop until she finds it." Bennett noticed the tension in Sarah's shoulders. Fear, yes, but not of being found, of what might happen if Holt finds her first. "Where is your brother now?" Bennett asked. Sarah's eyes dipped to the ground for a moment, just a breath. "He's gone," she said. "Not dead, gone. He disappeared years ago after the last incident at Greenvale. I assumed he just left the state entirely, but those notes, those pages he kept, he wanted someone to know. He wanted someone who didn't run." Bennett digested this. Sarah didn't look like someone protecting a killer. She looked like someone protecting the only man who had ever stood up to one. A fragile defense in a world built to ignore danger until it was too late. Behind them, the metal doors clicked as they shifted with evening winds. Holt was closer than either of them knew, and something had just opened in the aisle behind Sarah without her hearing it. End of chapter.
Chapter 10. The Nurse's Quiet Truth.
Bennett turned slowly toward the faint metallic thud echoing down the corridor. A storage door, 2 units behind Sarah, hung slightly ajar, swaying on its hinges. "Stay here," he murmured. Sarah didn't argue. Bennett moved down the row, quiet but not hiding. Whatever waited ahead already knew he was here. The light flickered as the wind rattled the metal siding, throwing shifting shadows across the concrete. He reached the open unit and pushed the door fully aside. Empty, dusty, long unused. But a second sound, soft, shuffling, made him turn. On the far end of the corridor, a figure stood half-lit in the doorway, coat gray, hair pulled back. The same stillness as before, the same watchfulness. Marianne Holt. She wasn't trembling now. She wasn't whispering or shrinking behind a chain-locked door. She stood with the composure of someone who had already decided what she would or wouldn't say. She looked at Bennett first, then at Sarah, and then back to Bennett as if confirming she had the right audience. "You were looking for Elias," Holt said, her voice steady, almost gentle. "I knew you would be." Sarah froze. The fear in her earlier words sharpened into realization. Holt had not followed Elias for decades. Holt had followed the pattern, the ledger resurfacing, the records emerging, someone asking questions. "Where is he?" Sarah whispered. Holt's eyes lowered. "Gone. A long time now." Sarah's breath hitched. Bennett saw her hand curl involuntarily into a fist. He ran," Holt added softly. "He was good at disappearing." "And you chased him?" Sarah asked. Holt shook her head. "No. I looked for him only once, after he left Greenvale. I needed him to understand." "Understand what?" asked Bennett. Holt turned to him, eyes calm, unblinking. "That I wasn't killing them."
Her voice didn't rise. It didn't falter. She spoke like someone correcting a misunderstanding about a misplaced file. "They were suffering," she continued. "No one saw it. Not the doctors, not the administrators. They didn't spend the nights listening to them breathe, listening to them hurt." Bennett held her gaze. "None of those patients were terminal." "They were in pain," Holt countered, quiet but firm. "It's not the same thing." Sarah stepped forward, trembling. "You took 14 lives." "No," Holt whispered. "I eased 14 deaths. The The dying were already happening. I made it gentler. Bennett didn't interrupt. Words like this told him more than any document. Elias didn't understand, Holt said. He saw one moment, just one, and decided I was a monster. What moment? Bennett asked. Holt turned toward the unit where Kern's notes lay sealed away. The night he walked in after it was done. The man had stopped breathing. I was smoothing the sheet, making him presentable. Elias thought. He thought I enjoyed it. Her expression tightened. Not anger, but sorrow worn thin with time. Holt said, he ran from something he never asked me about, and I never tried to find him again. I didn't want him afraid. Sarah's voice cracked. You frightened him. He had nightmares for years. He never went near a hospital again. Holt closed her eyes briefly. I am sorry for that. Bennett stepped forward. Marianne, the ledgers, some entries weren't in your handwriting. Some were added later. Who altered them? Her eyes opened. The administration, she said. They wanted it handled, quietly. They didn't want reviews. They didn't want lawsuits. They saw what I had done and didn't care why. They only cared how it looked.
And they sealed the records room? Yes, a faint nod. To protect themselves, not me. Bennett felt the subtle shift inside the narrative. Holt was not proud of what she had done, but neither was she remorseful in the way the law required. She lived in a moral gray zone where her conscience had rewritten the boundaries. Why come here tonight? He asked. Because once you opened that room, Holt said, I knew someone would find Elias's notes and someone would seek me out. So you came to control the story? Bennett asked. To finish it, Holt replied, so no one else is blamed. Not Elias, not Sarah, and not anyone who failed to stop me. Sarah's voice trembled. You're admitting it? I am acknowledging it, Holt said. What would you have me do? Insist that 14 coincidences aligned on my shift? That a pattern emerged from thin air? She exhaled, tired, resigned. I eased the passing of people who suffered, she said. I believed I was helping. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps I wasn't. But I did it. The quiet in the corridor deepened. Bennett studied her. No triumph, no defensiveness. Just a woman who had lived decades balancing the weight of her choices. He reached for his phone. I'm going to call this in, he said. You understand that? Holt nodded once. I've had a long life, she murmured. I'm not afraid of the end of it. Sarah stepped back, tears gathering but not falling. Holt looked at her with a small, almost fragile expression. I never meant to hurt him, your brother. He deserved peace. Sarah swallowed hard. He never found it. Holt lowered her gaze. Neither did I. Police arrived 20 minutes later. Holt didn't resist. She placed her hands behind her back with a grace that felt almost ceremonial. As they led her away, she gave Holt one last look, the kind of look shared between two people who understood that truth is seldom clean and justice is never simple. And then she was gone. The district prosecutor accepted Holt's statement. Old records, Kern's notes, and Holt's own words formed a partial mosaic of the truth. Some deaths could never be conclusively linked. Some details remained ambiguous. The administration's complicity was quietly reviewed, meaning it would amount to nothing more than footnotes and internal memos. Bennett filed his report. 14 deaths. One nurse whose lines blurred. One orderly who ran too late. One truth dug out from behind a welded door. He closed the notebook on his desk and turned off the lamp. Some cases didn't end cleanly. Some never had a chance to. But at least this one didn't stay buried. End of chapter. And end of story. Please like and subscribe to support our channel and to listen to more Bennett Crowe mysteries.